Hi everyone! Thank you for joining me back on my channel for another knitting podcast. The last podcast I put out was all about binding off summer, and now we're going to come back for part 2 of the seasonal series for casting on fall, which I think, like many of us knitters, is my favorite season. You might notice that I'm in a different space today. This is my boyfriend's apartment. This is my little corner that I've kind of staked out as my knitting area. I have a whole basket of yarn for the projects I'll be talking about today sitting right next to me. But before I get into my fall knitting plans, which is what this video is all about, I'll let you guys know what I'm wearing, just in case you're curious. So I currently have on my Palma tee, which is by Knit. And I knit this tee in Drops Bell, which is a super affordable kind of dupe for Sadness Garn Line. And it's just the perfect summer fiber where it's a mix of cotton, linen, and viscose. So you've got that light, drapey, airy fabric without just the stiffness of cotton alone. And I believe it's in the color Pearl. I wanted just a super simple, basic top so it can kind of highlight the lace and kind of match with anything and everything. Anyways, moving on to fall projects. Today I'll be talking about 5 different patterns, all of them being sweaters that I'm really excited to cast on for fall. And I'll start with the patterns that I'm most likely to actually finish by, November. Some of which I've already started on, and then trailing off towards the end will be a couple patterns that if I have time to, I would love to get to, but life is short, it's a short season, so we can just cross our fingers and hope that this list is actually a to-do list instead of more of a manifestation board. So number 1 of those 5 projects I've actually already started on and gotten some significant progress. This is the Hanna sweater by Paula Strict. This is my first time knitting a project by Paula Strict. I was really pulled in by the cables kind of looking like a double-sided braid, kind of waterfalling down, and that's accomplished by just 2 3x3 cables that come together. And it's a drop shoulder design. It actually doesn't have any short rows, and it's very oversized. I will say that one possible drawback to this pattern is it only comes in 4 sizes, but each of those are incredibly oversized. So I feel like you could encompass a range of different sizes within those. But if you're looking for more of a custom fit with a certain amount of ease for your given size, this probably won't be the pattern for you. However, I do want a really oversized boxy garment, and I don't mind if it's like, 20 centimeters versus 30 centimeters of positive ease. So the pattern of cables within this project really just convinced me to get started. This project is extra special because I'm making it out of some yarn that my parents picked me up during their anniversary trip to Scotland. I lived in Scotland for a couple months 2 falls ago and went to the store that had local fiber and textiles from Scotland, and this one yarn literally lived rent-free in my mind after I left Scotland, and I was kicking myself for not getting it. And then when my parents went back, I was like, okay, you need to go to this address and get this yarn for me, please. And they did. I don't have a ball of it with me now because I didn't pack enough, and I literally knit to like the last little bit of the ball that I was on. But it's called Lowland DK, and it's Scottish lamb's wool. So it's so incredibly soft in this light oat color. It kind of reminds me of like the cream on a cappuccino. And then I'm pairing it with my favorite mohair, which is Aloft by Knit Picks. I got this yarn when Knit Picks was having like a mega sale. I think I got it for maybe $3 or $4 a ball, which is insane. I definitely recommend just kind of keeping an eye on knit picks for when they do have sales, because sometimes if they have too much stock of a certain item, you can get really good deals, especially on their mohair. So I just joined in the round of this sweater last night. Again, it's a drop shoulder, so you do the classic construction of making the back panel, which is kind of a triangular shape in this case, or a trapezoid, then doing the 2 front shoulders, and then doing the front panel, and then joining in the round. And I think the cables, which occur, you know, every insert number of rows, I don't want to give up too much about the pattern, is going to keep me going throughout knitting the body, because I could just see myself sitting down and not wanting to stop until I get to the next cable and the next cable and the next cable. So I'm really loving making this pattern. Obviously I'm knitting it literally so much that I underestimate how many balls I need to bring to my boyfriend's house to fuel my knitting. And when I get back, I'm gonna attach ball number 3 and keep going. So that's project number 1. We'll set that aside. And project number 2, I just started on, I want to say Friday night or Thursday night maybe. And it is a little different. It's the Stamford sweater, which is a pullover with kind of a quarter zip, but with buttons instead. I don't know what you refer those to, quarter button. And I really wanted to do this project because it's more of an outerwear piece. And I have these ceramic fish buttons that I got at the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival that I'm really, really excited to use. So those are destined for this project. And for the Stamford sweater, I'm on the raglan increases right now, and it's kind of hard to show you because I'm using like a tiny cord, so it's all bunched up. But there's nothing really crazy to show yet. I just did, I did the short rows. I'm doing the raglan increases, and the main thing to talk about is this yarn, which to me, this yarn was such an amazing find. I'll link the specific blog I'm talking about up above, but a couple months ago I went to West Virginia to hike, and of course brought all my knitting, and stopped by this craft center which had a whole set of racks of this local farm and mill with their own hand-dyed yarn. And I picked up a sweater's quantity of this, which is called the Quaking Maple Farm 2-ply. And what is so special about this yarn, other than it was locally grown and spun, is that it's hand-dyed with indigo. And something about me is I love naturally dyed anything. I think it's super interesting how ecology and art can come together. It's something that I continuously try to learn more about and experiment with. I've done natural dyeing with like lichen, with carrot tops, with dried marigolds, and then with kitchen scraps like, what are they called? Red onion skins. So if you want to hear more about that, maybe I'll do a little dyeing vlog or something like that. But I've never dyed with indigo before, and I absolutely love the rich tone that it creates. However, the one drawback, and I don't think this is about hand-dyed yarn in general, I think maybe Quaking Maple Farm just needs a little more practice doing natural dyeing, because when I knit with it, the blue rubs off on my hands and fingers and turns them blue. And the first time I was knitting with this, I looked down and I thought I was having like a circulation problem, or I had gotten bruised or something, because my fingers and my palm where I hold my needle were just completely blue. So that's a little bit of a bummer. I think it'll be fixed when I block this and just give it a little bath. But in the meantime, while I work on this, I just have to make sure I'm not wearing a shirt that I care about, or a white shirt, because it will definitely stain anything that I'm holding it up against for long periods of time. But yeah, last note about this project, I'm definitely in the beginning stages. It's really nice to have something stockinette on the needles when I'm also working on something that is a more complex cable design. And it's also my first pattern by the Knit Pearl Girl, which of course I've heard so many amazing things about that designer. I really like how clear the pattern is so far and the construction of it, and I'm excited to have this as a garment to wear when it gets a bit colder here. Cool. So those are my first two projects, which are both for me. I am definitely a selfish knitter, but when it comes to Christmas, I do like the tradition of knitting garments for my parents. Last year, I made my dad a sweater out of our own sheep's wool, and it was just kind of a basic raglan with a textured design. And this year I asked him if he wanted another sweater, and he picked out the Dagmar men's zip sweater by Petite Knit. And I've knitted up a little swatch of it also in our sheep's wool. This sheep that we have, she's gray. She has gorgeous wool and her name is Janie. Let me just get that close to the camera. Hopefully you guys can see the swatch. And the Dagmar calls for an Aran weight yarn. This is more of a worsted or even a heavy DK. So I definitely wanted to be good and knit a swatch so I understand how changing the weights of the yarn is going to affect the fit of the final garment. My dad's someone where he doesn't want to knit or wear something that's super oversized with a lot of positive ease, but obviously we don't want something like the Dagmar, which is really something that you wear under a base layer, to be skin tight, because that would be really itchy and uncomfortable. So we're kind of hitting a delicate balance there. So this, I only have the swatch done, and when I think about my fall projects, Christmas seems so far off, but something like this with the complex cable design in a man's size is going to take quite a while to do, which it's very worth it. So my dad, if he's watching this, it's totally worth it. You're gonna love it. It just may not be done on December 25th, and that's fine. But I definitely need to get started on this. I think once I reach a good point in my hanna sweater, or when I finish my hanna sweater, I'll probably cast this one on, just because, again, it is kind of overwhelming to have two cabled sweaters on the needles at the same time. But then again, I do love cables, and for fall, they're just so cozy and perfect. It's reminding me of like that iconic Rory Gilmore sweater is just what I'd like to channel into my fall knits. So that is project number 3. I have a skein of Janie the sheep's yarn here, and I want you guys to see how beautiful it is and how squishy it is. I think this is from when she was a bit younger, because she's definitely a lighter gray color now, but I have basically an endless amount of her yarn from her being our sheep, and I'm so excited to see what it looks like as this beautiful cabled sweater. Cool, so now we are at the part of the video where I'm definitely thinking positively, putting them into a fall planning video. Again, we only have so much time in the day, and knitting is not a fast process, and I don't want to be someone who is focusing on productivity over quality and even enjoyment in my craft. That being said, I do have a large stash that is sitting there with specific projects in mind. This yarn also has a special story tied to my travels. It's like completely unraveling in there. But this yarn is in peach and this mushroom brown. Hopefully you can see how beautiful they look together. And I lived in Argentina a while ago for 3 months and visited the northern region, which is called Jujuy. And I got to visit the mill of this iconic brand down there that does mostly, like, they do woven ponchos and other kinds of textiles, and they're called Hilanderia Warmi. I'll put their tag here. And I got to visit with my dad their actual mill where they take in llama and sheep fiber from the region, and they have all of their looms set up there to create the textiles, and they also had these massive boxes of their own yarn, which they sell as well. And that day was just like heaven. They also fostered stray dogs there, so there were just these really friendly dogs walking around that I got to pet while I dug in these huge boxes of yarn. And I picked out some yarn that was a mix of, or a blend of, llama and sheep wool while I was there. I have 2 balls of each of these, which are around, I want to say like 250 meters each, so in total it is a sweater quantity. I also picked out some for my mom. She has it in other neutral hues. And I've been really inspired by the trend of like thin stripes. I don't know how to explain that. Instead of being like a sailor sweater, like that classic French sweater with the thicker stripes, they're just almost 1 or 2 rows that are interspersed. I feel like there is a polo sweater that's a knit pattern out there that I'll stick up here and hopefully remember the name later, that really kicked that trend off. But something more my style, a little more of a classic version of that trend that I found, is the Baba sweater by a designer I hadn't heard of before named Streak. I hope I'm pronouncing that anywhere close to right. And it has this like mock funnel neck that kind of stands up. And then I think the sample photos are so gorgeous in those neutral colors. And as soon as I saw it, I thought about this yarn that I have. I love pink and brown. They're definitely 2 of my favorite colors. And I think they look so good together. It's kind of like a more fun version of a neutral, bringing some of that pink in there and using brown instead of black. So I would like to get to that. I think knitting stripes. I actually don't have any projects that incorporate stripes so far, just basic stranded color work rather than like row by row different colors. So I'm really excited to get this on the needles if I have time this fall. So I have one last garment to talk about. I recently had a day's worth of interviews for a grad school program, and it was such an exciting and exhausting process that afterwards I went to the nearest yarn store and bought myself a sweater's quantity. Sometimes you have to treat myself, or you have to treat yourself, and just not feel too guilty about it. And I feel like this yarn was well earned, and it's also so gorgeous and soft. It's just like so silky that I'm so excited that I have it in my stash now, whatever it becomes. It's the Woolfolk Tint, and it's 100% merino wool. Despite being wool, it is literally the softest wool I have ever felt in my life, and I felt a lot of wool in my life. And it's in this, it's like a wine red mixed with a chocolate brown. It is such a deep, true burgundy tone. I absolutely love this color. Like, if I could choose a color to dress in only for fall, it would be this. Like, I want my nails in this color, I want to dye my hair this color, I want to wear sweaters in this color. So yeah, I hope that shows you how much I'm excited about this. It's hard picking a pattern that deserves the beauty that is this wool. However, I've been having the front porch sweater, which is this classic cable and rib. I think it might be a raglan. I'll check and correct myself, but I've had that pattern on my mind for quite a few years now. It's by the designer Kevin Haggerty, and I think it would really add dimension to this yarn because although it's really dark, it's not so dark that you couldn't see cables in it. And if I don't do the cable and rib design, I think I do something like the Moonset pullover by Ozetta. However, I just think that this would fit such a cozy fall sweater perfectly, and for that I really just do think it needs cables to reach the maximum potential of coziness. So yeah, I think that I really hope that I have time to cast this on this fall, and if not, I don't mind postponing it to the winter, or just doing it whenever so I have it ready for fall 2026. So those are the garments that I have in mind. Accessories, I feel like I'm just gonna make those as they come up. Like, I love making colorwork gloves. I'll put a picture of some that I made in the past. And I wanna make some scrunchies, and I wanna make just hats and beanies. But all of that, I don't really have specific plans. It's kind of like, I'll see what's in my stash and then cast it on when the urge arises. However, something that I am intentionally planning for the fall that's not garments is just cute little house decorations. I'm someone who loves stuffed animals as an adult. I mean, I don't think anyone doesn't, but some people are more open about it than others, I guess. Like, I have a bunch of jelly cats in my house. And I want to get more into knitted stuffed animals because I feel like they just have so much character and are such a good project to use up odd amounts of yarn, where maybe you just have one ball of something, or you just have some scraps and you could make that into like a little sweater for a stuffed animal or something. But I was particularly inspired by two makers who I follow on YouTube. The first being Soph Knits Daily, who you should definitely check her out. She's probably my favorite knitting YouTuber right now. She does a bunch of travel contents as she's in her camper van across Northern Europe. But she was making the project of a little sheep from the book Moosh and Friends, which is a book I would love to get my hands on one day. But hers just looked so charming, and it had like this bobbly lace, I don't know how to explain it. It was just like a fluffy little vest for the sheep. I'll put in a picture. And then I also follow Hit Knit Hooray, and I know she's been posting on Instagram that she's making the pattern Good Bunny by Susan B. Anderson. And I was like, oh, I should make one of those patterns. And then I remembered that at the Maryland Sheep and Wool Fair this year, which I also made a vlog for that I'll link above, I got a kit for Freddie Platypus. There was a couple there that had a stand, and one of them was a children's book illustrator, and then the other one was a fiber artist, and they wrote a book about these characters, specifically this platypus, and then it comes with a knitting project for that platypus, which I just thought was the most adorable thing ever. And my dear friend Regina, who I went with, got me the kit to make Freddie Platypus, and I think that would just be such a sweet little on-the-go project to work on this fall. So I can't wait to get that started. I think whenever I get frustrated with just having large projects that are taking forever to finish, I'll start on Freddie and get him done for the fall. And then finally, I've been seeing little pumpkins like this just at farmers markets, at the grocery store, at Trader Joe's, everywhere. So when I was in Acadia with my friends, I made kind of an impulse purchase, which is the Peace Fleece worsted weight in the most beautiful heathered dark orange color. And I think the majority of it is going to be dedicated to a beanie, but a little bit of it I want to make a mini knit pumpkin, specifically the Pepo pumpkin patch pattern, say that 5 times fast, by Sandra Magalhães. I think that's a Portuguese name, and I struggle to pronounce Portuguese, so I'll obviously put her name up there in text. But this is amazing as a pattern because you can make it in so many different colors to kind of make a little varied pumpkin patch or even a garland. So I could even use, I have a bunch of scraps of lopi, which is that rustic Icelandic yarn left over from making a cardigan. And I could make them in each and every color paired with that Peace Fleece worsted, and then have a little pumpkin patch at home, which I think is just the sweetest thing ever. So, you know, I could go on and on about things I want to knit. I think my Ravelry queue is like 30 items long, but I'm trying to keep it intentional. I'm trying to keep it as minimalistic as possible so I don't feel overwhelmed with the possibilities of what I could make in this very short season. However, I think this is a good start, a good foundation for a very knit-worthy fall. I would love to hear what you guys have on your needles and what plans you have as the weather turns to the most perfect time of the year. I hope that you're knitting something cozy and having a wonderful time talking about knitting and thinking about knitting with me. So thank you for joining me. I hope you have a great day. Happy knitting!